the big 5 content topics, originally by Marcus Sheridan. So you can look up Marcus Sheridan. He's a content guy. He used to be called the Sales Lion, I think. So he must have started in sales, but moved out into content. Wrote a book called You Ask, The Answer.
Yeah.
No, the other way around. They ask, you answer. They ask, you answer. And that's really the core of the questions kind of approach that I talk about a lot is, if they ask something, then you answer it. If it's a question they're asking, that's where you need to be. But he's got a structure around the content that I think is really valuable. So should we dig into that?
Let's do it. What's the first?
So there's 5 areas, like I said, the big 5. So cost and pricing is often the first one. So the principle is that these 5 areas are the 5 areas that people tend to search the most. These are the questions people ask most about. These are the things that they are most curious about, the biggest pains that your audience, your customers, your fans, whoever that might be, might have. And therefore, you can do an ideation thing in each one of these. So I'll list it out. So cost and pricing. And then what you can do is you can take these categories, and what I recommend, and I've done this many times over the years, is just go write down that header and just write down every question that you can ask that is related to that category. So cost and pricing. So anything to do with, the cost of your product, the cost of a service, the cost of a gadget, a bit of gear, something like that, a bit of software, anything like that. Like what kind of things do we cover? Cost of pricing, Jacob?
Yeah, there's a few things. We have a lot of posts on our podcast host blog. So we've got cost of podcasting, how much does podcast production cost, how much the podcasters make. We also have on the Creator Toolbox, we've got one about how much the creators make, a little bit more general. There's also, I don't know actually if we have any on our blog, but there's also the sort of opposite of costs, and it's free tools. Free tools for this, free solutions for that,
Yeah, definitely. Well, that comes into one of the later categories, actually. But yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, cost and pricing. Yeah, I mean, if you do a product or a service, it's an obvious one. Like his background, Marcus sold pools in the early days. So his background, it came out of like, how much does a pool cost? And no one in his industry was talking about it at the time. Like no one would tell you, because then they wouldn't be able to just charge what they like when they turn up at your house and see that you're rich. And they're like, oh no, we're going to charge you 40 grand. Whereas we'd charge somebody else 30. And it's often hard to get pricing for services like podcast production. So that's a good one. Like we've got one on how much does podcast production cost? And it's always a bit of a depends answer. So this is the thing you have to get past. You have to get past being able to just always say it depends. I can't really give you a price. I'd have to get more information, because that's not good enough for people. Like they really want to know a rough ballpark. So you can give loads of it depends criteria. You can say, well, do you know what? If you were coming to us, here's how we decide how much it costs. So if you're creating something that's only 30 minutes long, you only want this kind of editing, then we could probably do that for you for like £300 an episode or something like that. Talk about £1,000 a month, something like that. But if you want this, this, and this, then it might be that. And if you want this, this, and this, then it might be that. So you can always give a breakdown that really guides people into it. But it's scary. Like a lot of people get put off this because they don't want to talk about how much their services cost, because they're afraid that it's like competitive intelligence, or like agencies are terrible for this, aren't they, Jacob? Like when you were in your agency days, do you think you could have talked your agency into releasing a how much does web design cost?
I actually tried very, very hard. And after I left, they ended up doing it, which was annoying. But it was such a taboo. Like it wasn't just us. The reason I wanted to do it was because no other agency in our area, in the Edinburgh area, had any prices on their website. And number one inquiry that you always get is how much does it cost? So why are we hiding this? It's when we didn't have made up prices on the spot. We just had a price list. Don't hide it.
Yeah.
Be the first to give the prices freely. And actually, you'll probably find that cutting out that bit of communication will invite further downstream inquiries. They'll be asking about what can we do rather than how much does it cost.
Yeah, that's it. And it just builds so much trust. Like if you're actually just open and honest about it, then suddenly the person there is like, oh, right, okay, so could get this for that much, I could get this for that much. Here's what I actually want. And it kind of tells them whether they fit in there. And they're more likely to come to you because you are quite open and honest about the cost. Whereas whenever you go to a service, like whether it's like getting your car fixed at the garage or getting a website designed, you're just always afraid that people are, taking advantage of you because you don't know. And it's a bit of a scale, like there's no set price on this thing. So as soon as you make it clear and transparent like that, I just think it just brings people to you, builds that trust and transparency.
Definitely. How many times have you walked out of a store because it's one of those places that just doesn't have price tags? And you know for sure this is not a place for me.
I've been able to spot those places a mile. I don't walk into stores like
You
that,
can
Jacob.
usually smell them.
Yeah, exactly.
Got weird perfumes and such.
Yeah, totally. So that's cost and pricing. So yeah, go and sit down, get a piece of paper out and just think of all of the things that you might be able to write about. Like even, so it can expand out into, we have like, how much does a microphone cost? Or how much does, it cost for podcast hosting? That kind of stuff can actually work quite well. We tend to have them built into our articles about microphones and about software, but we always have a cost section in there that tackles that because people are always interested. Which kind of leads to the second one, and this really relates to your free tools as well, Jacob. I've brought this up the stack because you brought it up. But the second one is best of lists. So this is one that really actually powered the growth of the podcast host in the early days. Can you think of the one that was can you remember the one I've talked about that was the best of list that kind of grew the podcast host in the early days?
It's got to be best microphones.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yep, totally. That was the one that took off in the early days. So, and that was just a fun article. I just wrote it back in 2010, 2011, like best podcast microphones, because I was a geek and I liked playing around with gadgets like that. I got to buy a few through my work at a university at the time. And then in my off time in the evenings, I would write about it. And I wrote 7 or 8 microphones that I'd had the chance to play with. And that took off. That was the one that became, as podcasting was growing up, people were searching best podcast mics, that would show up, and people would often buy through that article. And we would get an affiliate commission as well through that. So best of lists can be kind of double whammy because you can put your own products and services in there, but equally you can review lots of other things that relate to your audience that then maybe you can get partnership deals through or collaborations or affiliate revenue. So
there's a nice lesson in there about niching on it slightly, because I bet there was many articles on best microphones in general, right? For singing, for other vocal stuff, but actually there probably wasn't that much competition at the time for best podcast mics.
No, yeah, right place, right time. 2010. So podcasting was only 6 years old at the time, was definitely still very niche. So yeah, definitely right place, right time, like you say. But yeah, have we put any of them on the Creator Toolbox site yet? Because you've been writing a lot of stuff for there. Have you got any best of lists in mind for there?
Do you know what? I haven't done any best of lists. I think actually, you did a best of list recently though, didn't you? You put up best DSLRs for creators. Yes, is that right?
Yeah. And the cool thing, well, I only did that because I was looking for a new camera myself. So I was spending a morning, I spent a couple of hours doing research to try and find what the best camera to buy would be. And I just spent a little bit extra time to make the notes legible. And that became the article. So it was like double duty. I had to do it anyway for myself, and I turned it into an article for my audience.
I noticed though that you didn't buy any of the cameras on the list.
No, I did not. But there was a very good reason for that though. So you're absolutely right. I ended up just buying the slightly better version of the camera I already have, simply because all of the cameras on the list, all of the best actual recommendations these days for creators are a different brand altogether, and therefore my 3 lenses that I've spent nearly $1,000 on would be rendered useless. So it was much more worthwhile for me to buy the slightly better one of the one I've got.
There's a good niche article idea. Best Canon lens mount camera bodies for creators.
It's actually a really good idea. Yeah, for sure. Because that's exactly what I ended up looking for. Best DSL camera that suits these lenses that I've already spent money on. Yeah, for sure. Yes, I mean, a few other examples of best of lists on ours. Like we've got, best microphones was our early one, but we've got software as well. Best editing software is one of our top performing ones too. Best recording platforms, stuff like that. But I mean, it doesn't matter what you write about, you can always think of a best of. Like if you're an agency out there, you're even like a plumber that does creation, like creative stuff. So you're a plumber that's listening here because you're actually creating plumbing videos. Like do a best spanner article. Like literally, like it sounds ridiculous, but actually that kind of thing just works really nicely. And you know what? I'm leaning on blogging because that was always where we grew up here. But I mean, this works for YouTube and podcasting just as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you right? You're writing that for your target market though. So yeah, you might want to not do best spanners, but maybe best boiling tap, something like that. If you're
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely. Yeah. So it's for your audience. So it's for people who might use your service. But I mean, if people are searching for that, then they're going to break their toilet, having bought this best spanner, and then they're going to come and hire
That's
you
true.
to fix it because
So true.
you told them the spanner.
That's just so true. Yeah, yeah. And that's the classic, isn't it? Give them the solution and then they realize it's too difficult. Then they ask you to do it and they pay you instead.
Yeah, definitely. But taking the plumber as an example there, they could write, so they've written an article on how much does it cost to fix a toilet first. So they've found you, you've said, well, I'll charge like 400 quid to fix your toilet. And they're like, oh, maybe I'll try and do it myself first. That's expensive. So then they search best toilet repair tool and you show up for that one. Oh, this guy again. But I'll buy his spanner that he's recommended. I'll go and fix the toilet. You break it and you're like, shit, right, okay, £400. That's that guy. He's the guy that's been helping me so far. I'm just going to go and hire him.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's how it works. You tie them into your web of content and it ends up coming back to you when they actually want to pay for something. Right. So number 3 is the more negative side of things, but it's problems. So this one's a bit more ephemeral. So it's the standard kinds of problems that come up in your niche. So this is potentially more the ones where you have to think back and say, like when people came to you, so Jacob, when people came to you to do things when you were freelancing or like when you were at the agency or whatever, let's say a website design, when you were trying to sell that as a service, what was like the questions people would most often ask you about websites?
Oh, almost invariably how to edit this WordPress page, how to, change the links in my WordPress menu and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was little niggles, just things that they just couldn't figure out.
There is, yeah. So there's a problem. Like, my menu. Why has my menu got like, I don't know, home? It's got about us in there. I don't even have an about us page yet. It just came by default with a website. Problem they have, they're going to search how to edit the navigation in WordPress. So it's anything from simple stuff like that up to going back to the plumber, how to stop my, how to find my stopcock because I have water currently flooding my house. Or how to stop a tap leaking, things like that. So suddenly this is the how-to, really. It's really, you can do it by the question because it can be, why is my tap leaking? Or you can do how to fix a tap leaking. And those are the keywords. Like people will just type in those questions or those problems themselves. So yeah, that kind of thing. You got any other examples there, Jacob? Anything you think of that works nicely as a problem?
Well, I was actually going to ask a question. Is there any other format other than how to? Because problems is a bit, it's a bit wider than just how to.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of common, I don't know, like what to do when? I don't know.
Well, you've got like one that came up with us all the time back in the early days was, what's that buzz in my recording?
Right.
Like why is my microphone buzzing?
Yeah.
So stuff like that, or you go back to, like I'll take Marcus's example again, the pool guy. So one of his examples there was like, why is my pool going green? So it's anything that's a question like that leads to something that's causing a problem for people. Like, why is this happening? What is causing this? How, the how is the other question, like, how do I fix this? Yeah. So anything that relates to that, like the plumbers, like we said, the tap leaking, if it's an agency, we're talking to creators. So people out there creating content, like coaches, anyone that's, coaching, like one of the biggest niches out there is mindset, isn't it? Mindset, well-being, like, why am I always worrying? Why am I always ruminating? Like things like that, these are problems that people have that then if you can help them fix it, if it's a problem that you fix, essentially, then that is what you need to be showing up for. And it generally transpires as a question, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. Number 4. So I love number 4, actually. This is a fun one. We do quite a few of these. We should do more of these, actually. But they work in lots of different areas. And it's comparisons. Mm-hmm. So comparing different things within your niche. So again, will you buy the Rolson spanner or the Stanley spanner for the plumber guy? Or like a fiberglass pool versus a concrete pool for Marcus. For us, it's things like comparing types of microphones. So condenser versus dynamic microphones, or comparing bits of software. So Alitu versus Audition or something like that. Or if it's hosting, so it's like Buzzsprout versus Alitu hosting, or Buzzsprout versus Libsyn or something like that. So yeah, there's loads of different examples in there. And you've written a few comparison articles like this. So we do quite a lot of those for the podcast hosts, which are just informational. And we do make recommendations sometimes, but we generally give pros and cons for both and rarely say like one is always the best. Usually it's this one's better at this and that one's better at that. But with our feature pages, that's kind of different one, isn't it? Like, tell me about feature pages.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's much more, that's a product page, right? That's where kind of trying to sell ourselves. I will say, I did try to also kind of present the, I tried to at least argue for the other product in certain cases, so I wasn't completely biased. I think that's important as well, because when you do find, so if I go to a company's website and it's a comparison that they've written about their product versus another one, and it is super biased, and it's just like you know the types of lists where it's like, look at all these things that we do and they do none of them. It's just no one is like failing to see past that. That just makes you look like an asshole. And I don't
agreed.
I don't know how often that really works, but if you have a product that people are looking up alternatives for, I think it's something that you definitely should have.
Show up for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we didn't have them for quite a while, so we should have done it sooner.
Definitely. I mean, what's the goal of this really is to build trust. Again, this content approach is all about, like Marcus said, they ask, you answer. This isn't necessarily about selling directly. This is all about gaining trust. It's all about building trust, building that audience that grows to like what you do. You help them out, and they'll help you back at some point in the future. They might not buy right now. Your product might not be the best option for them right now, but they will come back to you in future because they'll know that you helped them out, or they'll recommend you to other people for whom you are a greater fit. So I just think that's really nice approach to it. So all about building trust. All right, so that's comparisons. I mean, to widen that out, just a couple of other examples, like the mindset coach, for example. You even do things like this version of, what do you call it? What's that? Cognitive behavioral therapy versus like inner voice therapy or something like that. No, if you're in a niche where people are coming to you, you know the things that people are thinking about. Like, would I come and I will do Pomodoro technique for my productivity versus time blocking, that kind of thing. Like those comparisons, like you can get comparisons in any area because you're always like debating over whether you do this thing or that thing. So I think this is another thing. Just sit down, have that comparisons header at the top. Like, what do my audience compare? Spend 15, 20 minutes and you'll come up with dozens of them.
Yeah. I think of all the ones that we've talked about so far, comparisons are probably the furthest down the funnel as well. So if it's something that you're writing for your product, I think, out of people looking up problems, looking for the best of, I think even more than best of, when a kind of someone that's maybe looking to buy something from you, service or products or otherwise, if they're comparing it directly versus something else, it's because they're pretty close to that point. So I think,
good point.
For sales, it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. We've not talked about the funnel. Let's come back to that at the end, actually, kind of rank where all these stand in the funnel, because that's a really important thing to think through. You're absolutely right. Okay, and at the bottom of the funnel, potentially, is the next one. So number 5 is reviews. I mentioned reviews a little bit earlier. Like the best of list is almost a set of mini reviews for everything. And often our best of lists actually will link to the product, but we'll also link to our detailed review of each product too. So if somebody goes through and they find, a microphone that seems to suit them in the best of list, they'll probably click on our review and they'll read the full review. They'll get the sound sample, all that kind of stuff. So you can review, again, just about anything, any industry. There's some way to review things. Like, again, go back to the plumber. There must be reviews of like boilers. Like, is this the best boiler? Is this the best toilet system? Is this the best shower system? All those kind of things. Mindset coach, like review different types of programs, that you can go through to improve your mindset, all that kind of stuff. You can even review like don't know, there's areas where maybe you get, like I was thinking of the therapist there, like could review different therapy services. It's online therapy. So review like BetterHelp and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's a rare space where you can't find something that your audience is interested in, that they'd be interested in your expert opinion on that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it doesn't need to be directly related to your area as well. It doesn't need to be exactly your product, your niche. Like, I mean, one of the biggest, I don't know if you want to call it a show, and the guy's slightly questionable, but one of the biggest review series in terms of content is Dave Portnoy and his pizza reviews. And that's just a purely brand building thing, isn't it?
Okay. Well, I don't know anything about this.
Do you know?
How does that work?
Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports. I think it's like,
Okay.
almost like college humor for bros.
All right.
But it's a
okay,
big kind of content franchise, and they do a lot of stuff. It's a lot of kind of stuff around sports and all that kind of stuff. But he goes around all sorts of different pizza places in America just reviewing pizzas, because that is exactly the kind of thing that his audience would be interested in. He's not selling pizzas, but it's just a good kind of bit of brand building for him, and actually people get to know him just for that. And actually, it's probably the only thing of his that I ever watch is his pizza reviews.
Yeah, to someone you like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. You're absolutely right. It doesn't, if you sell a service or a product, obviously there'll be some reviews to be had, because you can review competing products potentially and build more trust by actually doing it honestly, unbiasedly, say what it is good for, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we run Alitu, we run our own coaching services, but we also have reviews of all the other recording apps, editing apps, hosting apps, all of that kind of stuff. So we review anything that's interesting to our audience, because that's where we want to be in front of. And equally, like if you're a productivity coach, you can review like devices, you can review books. Like that's generally the kind of base level. Is there's always some books related to your niche that you can review. So get on there, find the most popular 5 books in your space and just review them and put them on your website. And people will be searching for reviews of those books. Or even like, just think the Pomodoro timer. Can you review those little tomato clicker things?
Definitely. There's so many of them. You need to come up with some metrics though. Clickiness, loudness, how smooth is the movement.
Yeah, definitely. I think that a good way to come up with this is, depending on your space, get that piece of paper out, right at the top, reviews, and then have like who your audience is, like what kind of products and services are your audience interested in. And as soon as you list out, just you start listing that. And often that's the same as you, like often we're content creators and we're writing or blogging or videoing for basically other versions of ourselves or like past versions of ourselves. And so you can remember back to when that person, what did you like at that point? What were the things on your bill? That's often a good technique that people talk about. Like look at your credit card bill, your bank statement. Like what are you spending money on at the moment?
Exactly. Look
There's
around you. What
totally.
is physically around you?
Yeah.
You've
What's in your
been
room?
doing that a bit recently on YouTube, haven't you? You've been doing shorts. Actually, just you've got an office full of kit. And there's so many things that you haven't talked about, and it's easy just to kind of pick it up and get started. Yeah.
And the most basic things, actually. Like I did one on my mouse, which actually got really quite a lot of attention compared to some of my other ones, because it's seemingly such a boring, basic thing. But I tend to spend a little bit more on my mouse than most people do, probably. So I reviewed it on a short. I thought I couldn't get away with more than 60 seconds, and it went down really well. And it made me think maybe I need to do a proper video on this.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's a psychographic kind of resonance between you and your audience. So even if it's something not necessarily directly related to your topic, it can still be quite valuable. But the closer related, the better, especially when it comes to a blog or a YouTube channel, because they're so search algorithmically powered. So if you can stay kind of on topic, that's really valuable.
And that's one thing just to cap that off is actually reviews are probably one of the most AI-proof topics or formats out there, right? So hard to fake that. It's actually probably maybe comparisons as well, but I think more so reviews. Especially new things coming out. We were just talking about that for our blog. Like we've been, like many other content creators and blogs. We're thinking about what does AI mean for search and for information gathering, but one thing that it'll never really be able to do is actually give real personal experiences on the things that we use. So hard to
absolutely.
fake.
Yeah, that's you're totally right. The human view on it, the trusted view on it. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the trouble, isn't it? Like the more AI results can be great for some things, but because they're trained on so much, they just become so generic that they're actually just they're so like widespread that they just become a bit irrelevant. Let's think about the funnel. Your content, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube channel, whether it is a blog, even newsletter potentially, all these content parts are, at different stages of people's intent. How do you think about drawing people into the funnel in terms of the content? Like what stages do they go through when they're looking at buying a product or a service?
So there's 3 stages. You have a problem. So I had a problem. One of the taps in the kitchen wasn't working. Wasn't actually sure exactly what was going on. So first thing I did was actually look up something like why is, so we talked about this in the in those problem content format. Why is this, why might this tap not be working? And it gave me a few different reasons. Turns out that it was just a part of the pipe that was connected to that. So at that point, I've got a few different options. I'm kind of considering what a good solution might be. And then I need to make a decision. I need to make a decision on how am I going to solve that. And that is either I'm going to hire a plumber, I'm going to call a plumber, or I'm going to go and buy that part and fix it myself. I decided to hire a plumber because I knew I would end up flooding the place. But yeah, it's a 3-stage sort of process. And I think, these content formats that we've talked through map to that really, really nicely.
Mm-hmm. So the problems tends to be the first stage. That's the one where you're figuring out like what is wrong. What ones do you think map to that second stage best?
Yeah, I think it's probably you start off with the problems, and it's probably best of. Matches quite nice to that. You're looking for you might be looking, I didn't need a tap, but you might be looking for best tap, that kind of thing, or best plumber in my area, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Maybe even cost and pricing at that stage as well. You're starting to think about, is this something I can actually afford to do? Like, what can I afford to do at this stage? That's kind of, once you know what the problem is, you kind of figuring out,
That's it. I think, actually, rather than when you figured out what the problem is, I think it's when you figured out what the solution is, right? Because you're problem to solution to decision, really, I think. Yeah,
perfect. And then by the time you're almost at the bottom of that funnel, that's when you're thinking you've got a good idea of what you need to do. And it's actually like how exactly you're going to achieve it. So then you're down to comparisons, maybe like, okay, I've got a really good idea, but I still have these 2 to make a final decision.
Try to filter.
This plumber versus that plumber, this tap versus that tap, this technique versus that technique.
Exactly.
And then reviews as well, they're like right at the bottom.
Totally. I think reviews is probably the final, right? So if I'm trying to decide, or certainly for me, when I'm trying to decide between maybe 1 or 2 products, I will compare maybe the top 2 most recommended. And then before I actually make that final decision, I want to see a big review on it, right? Because you look up a comparison and you'll see this, when you look them up, you're not getting a lot of detail on either thing. You're just getting, one is better at this, one is better at that. But actually I want more kind of qualitative data at that point. I want to know as much as I can. I might go to YouTube and watch a 25-minute video on it, and then make that final decision.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, good stuff. I mean, I think the end point is if you can plan out content that fits each of these stages, you're starting to reach people throughout. That's when you feel like you're everywhere, doesn't it? Because they search for the problem and suddenly you show up, but then they search for the kind of second stage where they're starting to narrow things down and you show up again. And then suddenly they're searching for their final step and you're there again. And so it's quite easy. And I've seen content creators do this many times. Like they just end up doing all at one stage. So you just do all problem stuff and all best of lists. And actually you don't have anything at the end of the funnel. So by the time they get to buy, you're actually nowhere. They don't see you at all because you haven't done enough reviews or comparisons. So the real kind of outcome here is you need to make sure you're splitting your efforts across all layers of the funnel, whether it's just make sure you're tackling one from each of these categories, or whether you're thinking about the real stages of buying for your particular industry and making sure you're, at every stage there as well. All right, cool. That's good. Anything else on that, Jacob, before we tie it up?
No, well, I mean, just an observation or a question, and I think actually it's kind of been answered. But a lot of these content formats are so built around actually what we search for in Google. how to XYZ, this versus
Yeah,
that, best
yeah.
thing for this. Do you think the content came first and we adapted our way of searching? Or do you think that we searched that way and that is why these content work?
Yeah, I think the latter. I think it
Yeah.
came about because we're all humans and we all ask questions and these are the things that we go through when we're looking for stuff.
Yeah.
These are the questions in our head, whether it's give me a review of Alitu or whether it's comparing something with something else or whether it's just the top level. So I think it resonated with me the first time I heard Marcus Sheridan talk about this because it just felt like it made so much sense. And like intuitive sense that that's the way people search.